Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts Radio Network, kingofpodcasts.com.
Time to do a big old update on the FCC, NPR, PBS, and the NAB.
The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
This is episode 379 of the Broadcasters Podcast. This is King of Podcasts here with you. Welcome you to the program, and thanking you for all making time to go and join me on this little quandary that I have, this passion project of mine I've been doing since 2018, and I'm here. We're going to go and do an update on a number of stories that have been going on involving the FCC. We've talked about over the last couple of weeks because we have new information to go ahead and share and disseminate with all of you. When it comes to the FCC and their plans to defund, the federal defunding of about $1 billion from National Public Radio and the Public Broadcasting Service. As well, they're dealing with the issues about the delete initiative we talked about a couple weeks ago, where the National Association of Broadcasters is intervening in a lot of things. They had their annual convention last week. We talked to them about that. And we're going to get a little bit into that a little later on, but we're also going to mention the fact that they're looking at things like ownership rules, foreign ownership rules, and various other things that are going on. We're going to go and talk about all that. Comments that are being taken, given, and submitted to the FCC prior to meetings that are coming up to go and talk about the change of deregulation and this delete initiative. So the NAB wanted to be on top of this right now because they know there could be a lot of things that could go in their favor or couldn't. And we'll talk all about that very shortly because there's a lot that goes into this and we'll explain more about it. Also, a little later on, I want to go ahead and talk about the NAB, like I said, and a couple of surveys that have come out about heavy radio listeners in decline, the next wave of tech and how AI might be creative, or how creative can it be. And then there's a story that came out about the gimmick, the trend of PR companies doing what's called spray and pray PR. Very interesting story I want to go and get to there. And also what's happening in LA because film and TV producers are getting hit with higher costs as continued production costs are going up and production in Los Angeles continues to go down year after year, especially after COVID. So that's all those things that are coming up here on the program. We'll talk all about it. Of course, you can find the show at my website, kingofpodcasts.com. All my social media outlets are there. All the episodes I do of all my programming here on the network, among the Wrestling Gets Real podcast, which I'm talking about WrestleMania. I have a 90-minute preview of the event coming up, and I'll be doing post shows about that event later in the weekend. I have my The Praise and the Patria series. There's a lot of things going on with that. Also pretty popular on YouTube. And I have my Podcasters Row series, which I have brought back, second season. And I have a handful of interviews I've already recorded and already have scheduled that you can hear twice a month on the network. And you can catch those. I have a new episode coming up this coming Monday that you can all go ahead and catch a chance. I forget it's Monday or Tuesday, but I have a new episode coming out this week of Podcasters Row. Look forward to that. And so much more. And I'm also looking to do some things where we might get some more guests on the program. I got the chance to connect with another company that is doing a lot of good for helping us acquire some really quality guests. Not just this program, but like on other things that I'm doing on my full-time work. And it's something I need to go and start utilizing more. The Podcasters Row series got a jump start because I put a post up there and I got a number of guests to come out of that. And we're going to do more of that pretty soon. And I'm thinking for the Broadcasters Podcast, there might be a few interviews I might also embed in here and start including those as well soon enough. But we'll figure that all out as that comes along. Let's get into the stories, and let's talk first about the deregulation and the whole delete initiative that I talked about a month ago here on the program, back at episode 374. A delegation of the NAB that did meet with Brendan Carr and Acting Media Bureau Chief Aaron Boone on February 21st to discuss this very point. And the push for regulatory reforms would enable broadcasters to compete more effectively in an increasingly digital media environment. That's the part we don't need to be worried about. For the National Association of Broadcasters and these established linear radio TV stations, they do not need to be competing with digital. Because my argument has always been they can stand alone. So I want to read a story that I went ahead and put together with the help of AI, because I wanted to go and put the argument out there. The future of media ownership. Because this is the thing that has been the biggest problem more than anything else. I'm not care about, okay, you want to take out regulations that are outdated or do not need to be out there that also cost stations more money. Okay, fine. We can discuss that. But see, the NAB and Curtis Legate, they want to go ahead and go underneath the radar and try to get the ownership caps dropped. Because what they want is complete deregulation. And I brought that up before. And then I also said this. Consolidating media outlets over the past few decades has reshaped the industry, raising concerns about the accessibility of independent voices. Local news and competition. I don't need to go and get into the whole point of where the attention to detail, the performance of radio stations when they had local news, when they had local content, when you had contests, when you had things that were drawing the audience in, when you had new music you were breaking right then and there. There's still a thing where radio can still be a tastemaker. I mean, satellite radio kind of proves that right now. There's more to that. Like, I can go on into a tangent about all the implications can be here if it's done and what that happens when they decide to go and do this. But first of all, the FCC has a couple of targets to acquire. So we're going to get to the point where the Trump administration is going to go ahead and push an executive order enforcing the FCC to go after NPR and PBS. So with that said, the story has come out that there's a memo which the administration plans to send to Congress when it convenes from recess on April 28th to open a 45-day window in which the House and Senate can either approve the rescission or allow the money to be restored. And officials who spoke to PR on condition of anonymity have confirmed the existence of the draft. So Congress might go ahead and take on what is President Trump's proposal to rescind $1.1 billion or 2 years worth of funding for the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. Now, with all that's being said about this story, we should go ahead and take what PBS is saying about this, because they put out a story about it on their news hour. Let's go and play what happened in the news clip as to what they're saying about it from their point of view.
The Trump administration wants to cut the federal funds that support public media in the U.S., which would impact NPR and PBS and the roughly 1,500 local public media stations across the country.
Now, without going too far into this, it's just the federal funding. But that's not saying anything about the fact that the bulk of the money, 90% of their money, is coming from viewers like you, listeners like you, or basically grants. Large, big donor grants that are taking care of that. And there might be things that might happen with the subsidies when it comes to NPR, but we'll talk about that shortly. There's a lot there. But again, NPR and PBS, they're going to kind of take a little bit of a view that this is like, let's kind of tell the truth here, but we're also going to say that it's, the perception is that the government is funneling in so much money into funding those channels and all those radio stations. Just the thought of that.
It would, of course, also affect national programs like the NewsHour. The Trump administration has now drafted a memo that could make those cuts happen soon. William Brangham's been following all of this and joins me now. So, William, the administration is asking Congress to cut funds to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That's a congressionally created entity through which NPR and PBS get federal funding. What are they asking Congress to do here?
They're asking Congress to use a process known as rescission, which allows Congress to claw back money that has already been appropriated. And just to back up for a second, CPB is funded on this a 2-year cycle, and that's by design. Originally, that was to insulate CPB from any political interference. So CPB gets about a little more than $500 million a year. That costs about $1.50 per year per American. And the administration wants that 2-year chunk, which is about $1 billion, immediately cut. So that's the money that would have been appropriated for the next 2 fiscal years, starting in this fall.
So what is the process here? How could this unfold?
Well, we're not going to get into that part, but what is being explained here is the fact that even though if the federal government decides to go make the point and does do the defunding, why are they doing it? It's in a way, because the Trump administration is trying to say there has been a media bias, a clear media bias on the way that they present their content. Now, I could care less about the political part. It is obvious that they're not center-based. They do not give fair debate. They do not give anything. I don't care about the fact of who's right or who's wrong. But it is true, okay? I don't expect NPR and PBS to go to a fairness doctrine, but their content has changed a lot. But that also goes with the news. The thing is, if you want different points of view, that should be privately owned content. The public airways should not be about having opinion editorial that goes towards, that really cuts off a certain amount of your audience, because you have people that might be from big cities or small towns, and they're not going to agree on things. They're going to have a different point of view. And I don't know if the local voices of these stations are doing anything about that, but they're not local stations. NPR and PBS are not really working as local outlets. They offer some local content in between their syndicated programming, but for the most part, all these stations are more or less national powerhouses with syndicated programming. Now, they might run shows a little bit different than others here and there, but for the most part, they're running the bulk of programming. Most of your NPR stations are going to run Morning Edition, all things considered, and they might run Miss American Life. They might run other things. They might run classical music. They might run other music. They might run other local programming, whatever they want to do, but they're doing it. And some of them, if they're going to be doing news, you're going to be hearing what the national point of view is from Washington, D.C., or from Boston, or from, New York, or wherever they are doing the show from. And that's what they're going to do. And it's not the representation of the entire American public. It's just not. It's been like that for a long time. But this would be a symbolic thing that would happen to NPR and PBS if this were to happen, because knowing that they're not going to be able to be a part of this, and they're going to have to go and make some changes about it, they'll have no choice to do it. But that's one of the things they want to go and take care of, and that they think they need to go and do. And then they put out a survey here while this anchor is talking to William Brigham about a survey that was brought up about the support for PBS.
Republican voices.
Some of the most trustworthy and reliable news sources.
Which is predominantly the NPR and PBS, which is giving us leftist news for decades and cultural indoctrination for the last 4 or 5 years.
We should note, PBS and NPR have consistently been rated some of the most trustworthy and reliable news sources in America. That is from surveys of public opinion, as well as independent analyses of media bias. And also, polls have showed that the audience of public media in America does cover the full political spectrum of this country.
Also worth noting, for example, on this program, we regularly invite and host conservative and Republican voices. William Brigham, thank you so much for that.
But the problem is, it's not the matter of trying to bring on different voices to be talking about certain subjects. They're not reporting news. I mean, if they're reporting the news, if you're just taking the weight of the news content they're doing, yeah, they're reporting it as best as you can, just like Associated Press would. They're trying to report it as accurate as possible, and they're at least trying to give you the full context of what's going on. The problem is that outside of their news division, they also have opinion editorial, just like if it was a privately owned company. Now, if you want to pick a company, okay? You want it to be Bloomberg, you want to be MSNBC, you want to be CNN, you want to be other news outlets, legacy media, right? And you want to go ahead and opinion editorial, or you want to be Fox News. You want to have opinion editorial? That's their choice to do that. But also do it without misleading the public and without radicalizing people to do something wrong or do something criminal. That should be the normal issue here, but we're not getting that now. We know that the media now that we have today, for them to go and make money, they're trivializing themselves because they have to be sensationalistic. They have to be Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, hard copy, the way they deliver their news, the way they have to go and deliver the content out there, the way they have to go and create some kind of emotional effect on viewers to get them to cry, get them angry, get them upset, or make them depressed, or get them scared. They want to do all that. Is that really something we want to go and get into? Is that something we really like? But that's the problem we have. Now, everything's already gone through where the heads of NPR and PBS testified in the front of the House Subcommittee on Delivering Government Efficiency, the DOGE Subcommittee, and they spoke, and everything being put in there. There was a survey that came out that says that 43% of Americans support continued funding, 24% oppose funding, 33% are not sure. So for those that are defending funding, it'll be said that much of PBS's content, like Sesame Street, is purely educational, and that NPR and PBS are sometimes the only free news channels available in rural areas. Not only do these stations provide cultural and educational value, but public radio is the backbone of the emergency alert system that covers and protects the entire state of Maine. And they also provide storm and other alerts in regions that have no mobile coverage. That's a defense of the funding. The opposition will say that Trump is saying that NPR and PBS are serving as contributors to the liberal media ecosystem that prioritizes Democratic Party narratives, blah, 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 blah. And the other one is that regardless of bias, the government should not be funding public media. That if anything should be kept separate from government and politics, it's the news and public affairs programming that informs Americans about government and its policies, says David Boaz of the Cato Institute. And I kind of feel like that. Listen, I don't want opinion editorial coming from public radio. Just report it. And part of this also comes from the fact that there are other organizations doing the same kind of thing that we don't need to have that part either, right? Reason.com puts a story out here. And when they talk about some of the issues about public radio anyway, you have some changes that have been made right now when it comes to not just what could be done to NPR and PBS. You have the U.S. Agency for Global Media. They fund Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I know Radio Marti is also part of that mix. And there's changes being made to that right there as well. So this is not just NPR and PBS being pointed out. It's a whole change of what public radio or public television is doing right now here and abroad. I don't know what the best approach is there right now, but I don't like the idea where we have this is going right now. But it's not the first time that the Trump administration was looking at things right now to go after the Corporation of Public Broadcasting, but there's still more that will be happening with this. What are they going to do about it? It's still a problem. And at this point, I'll still say this once again, and I said this before, that when it comes to the National Public Radio, if they were just operating just for podcasting purposes, if they just had the podcasting outlets that they have right now, they would generate a profit. And I think they were doing just fine. Would they be operating on a little bit less of a work? Yeah. But that's because with radio, I would prefer that the airwaves were owned by privately operated stations. And let's just go ahead and move along and get the market out there. I mean, there's also room that you can say that where maybe you have a station that's out there that can be operated by a national source. Maybe we don't have local public radio stations. I don't know if that gets out there. It can be much. But we can have a lot of podcasts out there to do that. I don't know. Maybe there's somewhere else we go with that route. I mean, there's a thing where when they talk about public affairs programming, there used to be a rule out there, and I don't know if it still applies today, about 3 hours per month of public affairs has to be provided. Well, make that a weekly format. And just make it where all these stations have to run something. If it wants to be Saturday, Sunday morning, fine, do that there. And then set it up for these radio stations to go ahead and they don't have to go and supply the content themselves. They can just supply content that's local to their area. So if there's local podcasts or local public affairs programming, rebroadcast it. Just do it right there and just see what happens. And that would be a bad idea. I like that idea, as a matter of fact. But that's one of the areas you're going to look at. And that's more or less the White House. They're going to go to Congress to go for rescissions. That is something we have to again wait and see if it's going to be done. And again, I didn't know in the story, but the reporter there, William Brangham, makes the point that it's a 2-year cycle that is put in place. And it was said to be to avoid political issues like this, but it's political anyway. That's what's going to happen here. Now, for the radio and TV end, the FCC is getting a lot of commentary and they are getting a lot of urgency from broadcasters in general, spoken or watched. First, let's go to the TV viewers, the TV networks. So the elimination of ownership rules, the delete initiative, the NAB, Nexstar Media, Sinclair Broadcasting, Gray Media, and other commercial broadcasters are all coming in asking for the elimination of ownership rules. So You have a story from tvtechnology.com that says the FCC's call for public comments and suggestions on outdated regulations that it should be eliminated has prompted a slew of filings from broadcasters urging the agency to abolish its ownership caps and a host of other regulations. So the delete initiative has made the docket. It's one of the most popular items on the agency's website with over 910 filings as of April 17th. And you have lengthy filings and letters from the National Association of Broadcasters, Society of Broadcast Engineers, State Broadcasting Associations, Association of Public TV Stations, PBS, Nexstar, Sinclair Broadcasting, Gray Media, Mission Broadcasting, and many individual TV stations. And the first one getting out there in front, National Association of Broadcasters, and how coincidentally it's right after their convention has convened. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's get into what the FCC is being asked of in this particular docket. So the NAB is urging the FCC to reduce rules that impede the transition to next-gen TV, sunset ATSC 1.0 broadcasts, update EAS rules, reduce paperwork, and rules relating to children's programming, equal opportunity employment, and other areas. You have next artists going out there and talk about things, and where there's a whole thing about outdated regulations hindering the ability of the local broadcasters to compete against big tech and what has been becoming an increasingly digital and highly competitive marketplace dominated by a few giant platforms that have no meaningful connection to our local community. So trying to say the local end, that tech is hurting them. Oh, poor things. Gray Media also goes the same way. Sinclair Broadcasting says they applaud the agency's push towards deregulation while arguing it must address a toxic combination of a rapidly changing competitive environment and the ossified regulatory burdens that are harming broadcasters and consumers. Public TV stations and PBS, they're all asking about getting rid of station logs and records, requirements related to the station logs, special temporary records, and other logging and record keeping that's no longer necessary. Also, same thing applying to TV translators, FM translators, that should be eliminated. Now, in the filing from the NAB, let's get into that part. Talkers Magazine talks about this, and I'll never go to these guys too much, but whatever. Curtis Legate, NAB President and CEO, says this is a moment for bold ideas. NAB is proud to lead the charge. Yes, the lobbying group will be happy to go ahead and just continue to control, manipulate, and cajole, and find their way to get more control at the behest of their large corporate betters. That's all they're doing. So I'm just going to go through table of contents and their delete docket, which you can go also look at this PDF. They want to talk about eliminating the national TV ownership rule, repeal the analog era local broadcast ownership rules, minimize the burden of the online public file and public file requirements, expanded foreign sponsorship identification rules, get rid of those, eliminate the biennial ownership report requirement, drop antiquated requirements that compel broadcasters to announce renewals or transfers of broadcast licensees. The EEO rule is ripe for examination. It can be substantially cut back to a general prohibition against discrimination. And also getting rid of outdated and unconstitutional children's TV programming rules. Also, they want to scale back rules that micromanage radio broadcast, eliminate the telephone broadcast rule, delete the FM radio duplication rule again, eliminate minimum efficiency standards that hamper AM stations from choosing antennas and locations that would optimize reach and lower station costs, eliminate rules that complicate authorization to access the higher end of the band for AM stations, for new AM stations, as a matter of fact. They have stuff about EAS alerts, rules of duplicative or other laws that are otherwise obsolete. So some of this is founded, but the ownership rules they want to complete, just get rid of it all. Completely deregulate all of it, which is extreme. You heard my comments a little bit earlier where I'm coming from with that. Now let's go into some of the things that we're being specifically asked for to the FCC under this docket. When it comes to foreign ownership rules, very important because we know that Odyssey made their deal in their bankruptcy hearings to allow Soros Fund Management, which is a foreign entity, to control 25% of their debt. And now they want to increase that to, I think it was 40% last time I read about that. So The FCC is submitting its rules governing foreign ownership levels needs clarifying. So they will have considered a proposal at their April meeting setting out clear expectations about its review of foreign investment and broadcast licenses. So right now there's limits on direct and indirect ownership. The usual 25% cap on foreign investments remains in place. And they said over the last decade has developed policies and precedent to implant foreign ownership rules, but in some cases never codified them. Most recently, the FCC agreed to temporarily waive the 25% cap on foreign ownership in order for Odyssey to exit bankruptcy during its reorganization. Then the company withdrew the request when its level of foreign ownership fell below the threshold. And the FCC in 2024 allowed the Spanish broadcasting system to exceed the cap on foreign investment. Now, the FCC's April meeting is scheduled for April 28th, and they're going to be going through and doing what's called a notice of proposed rulemaking to be voted on later this month, where the commission will clearly support robust foreign investment in U.S. companies and networks, and also go through all the issues of deregulation. So right now, this proposal is seeking comment on extending the Commission's methodology for determining foreign ownership levels and the remedial process for inadvertent violations of the foreign ownership benchmarks. They also want to look at alleviating unnecessary regulatory burdens in context of the foreign ownership review, and they want to seek comment on foreign ownership considerations related to processing of NCE and LPFM stations, among other things. The FCC is also dealing with the issues for the technical side, for boosters to fully replace main transmitters. So the requirement that radio broadcasters operate from a central main transmitter established during an era when high-powered towers were the only viable means to deliver market-wide radio coverage. Well, now there's a chance to replace outdated rules with technology that better serves the public, improving operational resilience and reducing unnecessary costs for broadcasters. Now, the Commission's already allowed limited geo-targeting origination for FM boosters. They're now arguing that there's some companies that are arguing now that the boosters should be permitted to fully replace a primary transmitter. So there's a station that's being pointed out here. Beasley Media Group has a new station, a Spanish classic hit station in Las Vegas, KOAS. The station's official main signal originates from a high-power transmitter in remote Dolan Springs, Arizona. And the booster is located atop the Strat Hotel, Casino, and Tower on the Las Vegas Strip, the Stratosphere, delivering the station's most impactful market coverage. That broadcasters should not be forced to bear the high costs and environmental burdens of maintaining a main transmitter when modern distributed systems can provide equal or better service to listeners. So the idea is that this FM station, 105.7, is licensed to Las Vegas. Their transmitter is in Dolan Springs, Arizona, but they have a booster signal. So they have the main signal that is operating from there, which really doesn't cover Las Vegas. But the booster signal for the station at 2,500 watts is able to go ahead and cover Las Vegas in the main market as a booster. And that works for them. They want to also make it where they don't have to necessarily have main transmitters and the boosters are where they can put them. So that's also an interesting little wrinkle in things. That would not be a bad thing right now. Overall, it's fine if they want to have all these other things they want to go and make changes of when it comes to getting rid of red tape, extra paperwork, outdated rules that come from the FCC that are going back years. Yeah, whatever it is to go ahead and cut some of the red tape, bureaucracy, the extra paperwork that's not necessary anymore because, there have been changes in the technology and the way that stations operate that don't work the same anymore. Yeah. The way they have to operate when it comes to children's programming. All that that's all understandable. I can see that. And of course, the NAB got in front of that. And they obviously got to go and talk about that with the folks in Las Vegas at their convention. And Lance Venta at Radio Insight talks about it. He says that attendance was down for the third straight year. Over a decade ago, you'd have over 100,000 people come to the NAB show. This year, it was 55,000. Meanwhile, with the NAB show, you would have different products and technology that would be up there for sale and not for sale, but to be exhibited at the show. But they were talking about the panels, the education, the tracks that were on the show floor that The panels focused on radio were seen well better attended this year, with many at standing room only. There were 2 panels that were not. There was Hofstra University's Andy Gladding that had a session about how he created a young engineering pipeline to commercial broadcasters by just being accessible to his students. And there was also a panel about the future collaboration between public stations needing by discussing how or outsourcing back office services such as engineering or traffic to third parties. They can get better services, things like that. But there was a lot of talk about the delete proceeding that could alter nearly every facet of the broadcasting industry as we know it. And that it is a conundrum that will take some time to figure out what happens with that. But the NAB has put all their concessions at the behest of the FCC. Let's see if they're getting anything out of it. Who knows? Now, some other stories that came out here. National Association of Broadcasters and Sound Exchange reached an accord on radio streaming fees. Let's get into this. So, it's a deal on how much money commercial radio stations will pay royalties to simulcasting online. So any stations that stream, they're paying for the music that they're putting out there, and they're paying a set amount of royalties. Now, this new deal, which still needs Copyright Royalty Board approval, calls for rates to increase to 28% by 2030. And the issue that was at stake was also streaming royalties and were to be collected and paid to more than 700,000 creators. So radio station streaming rates will climb up from the current rate of 25% per 100 performances to 25 cents per 100 performances to 28 cents per 100 performances in 2026. So there's not much of a change. Built-in increases each year until they reach to 32 cents per 100 performances in 2030 for non-interactive commercial webcasting services like radio station online simulcasts. They're not making much money on it. And with this sound exchange thing, they're not going to make much money off it because there's not much of an audience that's probably streaming to radio stations online in the first place. Because you still got to go to those commercials. There is, for the radio stations out here, if you want to listen online, to go ahead and listen to some of the commercials they have, which on these online streams, they don't get to run the regular commercials for whatever reason. They don't want to run the commercials that are running on the FM or AM dials. They want to run something else, usually something national or something contrived. And it's horrible. And it's bad. And there's been nothing that any of these online stations would do to fill those breaks in. They haven't figured out a good thing to it. I know there's an app out there I tried recently that will, with AI technology, will help you it'll find the commercials and it'll play the similar music of that station while the commercial breaks in play. It's not a bad idea. I tried it. It was okay, but I wasn't necessarily impressed by it. It's limited. But it was a nice try anyway. What can I say? A couple of things I want to bring up here before we wrap things up. The Fred Jacobs Media Tech Survey. Fred Jacobs always talk about, there's actually a couple of Jacobs in there, but Fred Jacobs is the one I know. So Jacobs Media Strategies, they put some insights into the consumption habits of 25,000 core radio listeners across the U.S. and Canada, surveyed January and February 2025. So some key findings is that YouTube has emerged as a significant platform for audio content, with listeners using it for radio station streams, podcasts, audiobooks, and music, reflecting a shift from traditional radio to digital platforms for audio engagement. So yeah, everybody's going to keep saying the same thing. Even radio, and even the folks here that YouTube, digital is a competitor. Well, it doesn't have to be. There's something where you could still have, if radio would do its thing and perform as it's supposed to be, with entertaining hosts, with good content, with the radio, with the commercials they have out there, doing some local outreach for the community, yeah, you might get more people listening in. Like, honestly, you could really do that. Just saying. Smart TVs are increasingly being used for audio content, including radio streams, Spotify, podcasts, and audiobooks, as traditional home radios decline. I don't know anybody that has a home radio anymore. I know I have one somewhere around here. But yeah, then they talked about the smart speakers, which I don't know if that's really making much of a difference for radio in the first place either. Radio is still a key medium. 61% of listeners are tuning in for engaging personalities. That's up from last year. And that radio has some strength in providing companionship and local content. And it's still free for the most part, but you're still bombarded with commercials that are horrible. Let's just say that too. Or from the Wrap. And we'll take from this real quick and just see what they say about it. But can AI be creative? The next wave of tech is a tipping point for Hollywood. I want to just take a couple of things that are coming off of that. We'll take a few things that come from it. So Hollywood's grappling with the upheaval of current AI tools when writers were striking over a machine-generated scripts to VFX artists watching their jobs being reshaped in real time. The next frontier is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. For Hollywood creators that are still catching their breath from the first round of disruption, the idea of AI smarter than Nobel Prize winners raises new, unsettling questions about the future of storytelling itself. Can AI ever possibly be creative? So the artificial general intelligence definitions that an element that's conspicuously absent is creativity, a quality that defines humanity and forms the foundation of Hollywood's entire output. But this gap points to a fundamental challenge. How do you measure or benchmark creativity? And more importantly, how do you build it into AI systems? I think what's going to happen is you're going to see AI being used on some very simple content, or content that can just be easily absorbed. But the thing is, if you absorb content, like if it's coming from a book or something that's already been pre-written, different content, and it has to just go ahead and just reinterpret it, maybe it'll pick up some of the same emotion or same passion that's coming from the creator of that book or that short story or whatever that is, and maybe it can resonate, and that can also come into, who knows. But the story here says the AI capabilities will continue to likely advance, generating both anxiety and opportunity in creative industries. And that also recently caused some tension because OpenAI released a new image generation feature for ChatGPT, and users immediately began using to mimic the iconic hand-drawn style of Studio Ghibli for some of their content. Another thing they talk about in the story is that the kind of work being done at the top levels of Hollywood, creating a multi-million-dollar blockbuster, building a television season arc, even editing a punchy comedy script isn't a general task. It's expert level, emotionally calibrated, high-stakes storytelling. And what people have built is not a tool for creatives. And that's the part that you have to keep in mind, that's where AI cannot completely control and overtake Hollywood or overtake television or radio or books or what have you. It just can't. Not only will you need creative input, but you need the human creative mind to be able to do that. So I hope people will realize that, yes, AI can do some menial, daunting grunt work tasks. That's what it's good for. I know that I need that for myself, but still, at the end of the day, I have to create the input for it. I have to be creative to make the content creative. And I have to explain to the AI on what it needs to do, but it's not going to completely get it right. You got to go a couple times with it, but that's okay. At least we do that. I'll get into the story right now about the film studios. So there's higher costs right now for film and TV producers, and Hollywood Reporter put up about this, that there's a lot of talk on Hollywood about the current and threatened tariffs right now for many in the production space, unpredictability of global trade, and that could harm the weakened state of domestic film and TV work. Now, finally, there's a story I wanted to go ahead and bring up here that I thought was pretty good and very interesting that they brought up this in the first place. This is from techbusinessnews.com.au. I have not heard about this site, but one of the things they brought up here is actually pretty good. And it is a trend that's called spray and pray PR, the thorn in the side of journalists and the media industry. Matthew Gianellis writes about this, and I think this is a pretty good story because I know running the full-time networks of WMR.FM and CannabisRadio.com, I normally get a number of PR outlets that will just put out there with blanket announcements or blanket stories about some product they're trying to push out there, and they're just hoping they might get something out of it. Calling it the spray and pray PR and media tactic. Mass blasting generic promotional pitches to journalists, fueling growing frustration among news outlets who are tired of being treated like free advertising platforms. The strategy rarely works in 2025, with emails from repeat offenders often ignored. This is the same kind of traction we have right now with telemarketers. How many telemarketers are you getting right now with all these automated messages? You never get anybody really on the line that's even taking the brunt of saying, hey, I'm sorry, I'm living on a fixed income, or oh, I'm not interested, or take me off your list. I'm not getting into that. PR agencies who are really on the spray and pray method are doing more harm than good. The hope, often misguided, is that anyone will bite and write a story. It's lazy and effective and ultimately alienates the very people that PR agencies rely on, journalists. True. I can tell you right now, if I go to my Cannabis Radio email, I will find a number of those type of PR stories that come up, and I just don't care about them. But they pop up all the time, hoping to get something about it. And I can't believe how many things I get from this on a regular basis. And I'll put it out there and I'll try to think, well, maybe something will come of it. Who knows? But I just don't care. But it's very interesting to see what they have. I see stuff on wrestling because it might resonate. Or so much that comes out there that has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on. Let's put it like that. I can't tell you how many times I'll get content that has absolutely no basis, no bearing on any of the content I'm doing for the network. So if I'm talking about something that's about cannabis or plant medicine, and I get something about wrestling, or I get something about, some other subject, gossip, why am I getting that for? Because these PR firms are trying to get something out there. So Matthew makes the point. PR is not about pushing out as many messages as possible in order to show a client some kind of reach graph and then hoping something sticks. It's about meaningful, targeted engagement that builds relationships and establishes trust with journalists. Yet spray and pray completely ignores this principle. And I've said this before on this program, if I have PR people coming in and they reach out to me about a particular guest or a particular subject, there are enough PR companies that I work with and I am familiar with enough that I train them. Listen, don't just give me somebody that's going to have just some blanket thing. Oh, it's 420. I got something about cannabis with you. No, they're actually smart enough to know, if they're going to be on my network and I'm going to be the arbiter of who decides to be on the network or not, I'll say, okay, keep in mind that you're just not going to give me some kind of thing. Well, 420 is here, and what is the importance of it? Here's somebody who can come talk about it. No, give me something that's really tangible that actually attaches to the person. And give me something to the story that tells me, okay, why should I interview them? Pitch me. Give me a real pitch. Treat me like I'm a human being. Do that for me. And then I'll pay attention to you. And I'll tell you, it did take a little while to get all these PR companies to kind of fall in line, but they did. So I don't have a problem doing that. And for the most part, they also know, okay, if they have their clients, don't reach out to me every couple months. Because unless you're paying for a sponsored interview as part of a deal that we make, every 6 months, I'll bring a company on. But I'm not going to have a company on 3-4 times to be interviewed on the network when we're not getting paid for it. We got to make some money off of this. But I'll give you the time, because honestly, if I give you the time to have an interview featured by myself on one of the programs over on Cannabis Radio, I'm going to give you a great interview. I'm going to push it out there. But I'm not going to just do it for everybody. I mean, Podcasters Row, I personally want to make it where just like, okay, if I have somebody coming on to talk about a podcast, they come on once. It's cross-promotional. Okay, let's bring two people on board. Let's talk. Let's connect. See what happens. But that's what I'm going to do. More than anything else. He goes on to say that, in contrast to advertising, PR campaigns aim for exposure through public interest and news items rather than paid advertisements to give their message third-party legitimacy. In the cannabis industry, I can tell you this, is that if there is any marketing being done, the PR firms would be considered. I mean, we always try to go and pitch to do podcasts for a company. Yeah, they'll pay us, but we're going to help them produce a podcast. It's not going to sound like an infomercial. We're actually going to put the real tangible content, teach them, train them how to be proper at doing podcasting or doing radio, basically, because that's what we've been doing all these years. We're going to present that format within a time frame and make sure you're taking care of this audience that is going to listen to your program and be engaged to it regularly. And we do pretty good at that. So by doing that, the PR companies have undercut from us because they're offering paid earned media. They're only going to get paid if they're able to get an interview or some kind of press coverage for you. So the PR companies, in some cases, they're not even going to go and charge that much to retain. And they'll get put until a 3 or 6 month contract They'll offer paid earned media to get extra money for themselves. They'll get a commission off the work they're able to generate for them to market and promote and somewhat advertise to a level all these companies. They're doing that. But for the most part, PR is like, they can't honestly ask for a retainer up front and say, okay, pay us $5,000 a month. They can't do it. They don't want to do that. They'd rather go the route of commissions and just let their team kind of do what their good route is and take on as many people in their portfolio as they can. That's their thought. He also brings up the growing frustration of journalists and news outlets. Journalists have a job to do. They're on a constant tight deadlines, sitting through hundreds of pitches, looking for real stories that will resonate with their audience. Radio people have that same thing too. And some journalists have reported receiving pitches for stories completely unrelated to their beat or publication's focus. No wonder that many now dismiss these emails without even opening them. Yeah, because then once you start doing that, you're going to get caught into a spam trap, and then you're never going to get noticed. Like, I can't even tell you how many people that are in my spam folder right now on both networks for the emails I get that they don't come through anymore because they already realize, yeah, I skip them or I don't read them because there's something there. It's spray and pay, as they say here. It also creates a growing divide between PR agencies and journalists, with trust becoming increasingly hard to earn. It's not just the annoyance of sifting through irrelevant pitches, it's the broader impact between PR agencies and the media. And that the PR and communications agencies often blur the lines between earned media and paid promotion. Their intent isn't to provide insightful and newsworthy content, it's to sneak in a glorified advertisement under the guise of journalism, which, by the way, I don't allow that. So, on the program I do on Cannabis Radio, Blunt Business, look, I got a pretty good system at play. Optimally, if these companies were coming on my program, they would love to be able to do a 30-minute infomercial on their product. But I don't let them do that. They've learned my format. I'll let them talk a little bit about what they're doing in terms of their company, a little bit of that at the beginning and at the end. And I'll give them a chance to plug. But that's really it. If there's some things that they have in terms of new announcements, I'll bring those up. If they're newsworthy, I will absolutely bring them up within the context of the show. But then what I've always learned about with my show, which is why it's performed so well, is that I'm taking the expertise of whatever the resume that the guest I have on is. You got to give me something that's important. It has to be a C-level executive, CEO, CTO, vice president, one of those lines. You're not going to give me a marketing person. You're not going to give me a salesperson. You're not going to give me any of those kind of people. Not that. I will not allow it. But what I do is I will then go ahead and take on a company and I'll take their expertise and then I'll go ahead and bring them on to go ahead and start talking about what they know. And I will ask questions that they're not going to know everything I'm going to ask either. I'm not one of those podcasters that just opens up and gives, here's what I'm going to ask you. I will not let someone have the opportunity to go know every question I'm going to ask. I can't do it unless they're paying for it. If they're paying for it, you get whatever you want. But if I'm going to do an interview that's going to be 30 to 40 minutes and do it for somebody like that, and I'm not getting a dime for it, it's just promotion. They might cross-promote us. That's great. Or the PR firm might do it. That's nice too, but still, no, I'm going to make sure that I get something tangible for the audience on my show. But I will give you time to promote. I'm fair about that. You'll get some time within, but to the benefit of my audience, I'm going to get some real takeaways of the interviews. And in the meantime, you're going to get a chance to go and plug your product. And you know what we do about that? We'll pitch after the fact. Because we'll realize, oh, you know what? You guys have a pretty good thing going here. And that's what we do. It's smart to go and do that. Matthew also says that expecting a journalist or news platform to run a story about a purely promotional article for free without any real news hook is both entitled and out of touch. If a PR agency knows they're pushing a story and they lacks hard news value, is promotional or just outright advertising, then they owe it both to their client and to the media to have that honest conversation. I like it. He's right. A lot of he's saying right here is absolutely right. No legitimate news outlet is going to work for free, so just someone else's content can gain exposure, clicks, and conversions. Like, how many companies are going in here? I mean, if you see any particular paid promotion out there from a newspaper or magazine or articles, and they're showing there's a paid, the sponsored ad, well, at least we're being honest about it. And I'll still read those. Because even if it's coming from the integrity of that publication, they're telling me that sometimes I'll still get some information from it because it'll be still good. So if your content doesn't have real lasting interest or editorial value, and you're not willing to sponsor or pay for placement, it will most likely be ignored. And PR needs to understand that part. Media relations still need the backbone of PR, but people are being burnt out by it. In the evolving landscape of PR, where social media, influencer partnerships, and digital storytelling continue to grab the spotlight, one core element remains stubbornly central is media relations. A recent data from Muckrack says a staggering 83% of PR professionals say media relations is their most time-consuming task. And it's also more difficult because agencies and in-house teams juggle ever-increasing client demands, shrinking newsroom sizes, journalists overwhelmed with the real relevant pitches, and the task of earning media coverage has become more complex and more exhausting. Somebody actually quotes in the story, "Media relations isn't dead, it's just harder and more crowded than ever. It's still where the magic happens, but it's also where the burnout begins." I like everything that's being said around here. Media relations is still the heart of PR as they're closing out the story, and like any overworked muscle, starting to show signs of strain, resulting in more agencies adopting the spray and pray tactic. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not necessary. But that's the thing, is that you got to be smart enough to go ahead and filter out what's out there that you do not need to go ahead and read and filter into. PR doesn't have to go that route. And it would be smart to go ahead and just realize, okay, we need to do something different to approach. And, I would love if there were some PR companies that would work with someone like me in podcasting and work with some journalists out there. Because I don't know how many of those that are out there that have journalistic backgrounds in PR. Because some of them don't. Some of them more have a marketing sense, more have an advertising sense, and then they come into PR to go and work on this, which is fine. But the thing is that if you don't want to be coming from a journalistic background and coming into PR, you should have an understanding of, being a journalist now in the day of AI. And, just realize you got to make it easier for the journalist or the media source to be able to present the content. You got to think like the journalist. That's the other part that should have been said in that article, personally to me. But you got to think more about what they're asking for and what will be best to get the story out there. And I'll tell you, some of these PR people that I work with right now, they're giving me talking points. They're using AI right now, giving me talking points, giving me other areas to go work off of. They're being smart about it. That's what you should do too. Great story on Spray and Pray PR. Good stuff. Come back next week for the Broadcasters Podcast. Remember, the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.